Y'all, I'm about to tell you a story that happened right here in Memphis, Tennessee, and I promise you, you won't believe what my own children did to me. My name is Patricia. I'm 65 years old today, standing in my living room on Poplar Avenue, the same house where I raised my 4 kids. I was married for 44 years to a man named Harold. We got married young, had our babies young, and I spent every single day of those 44 years being a wife and a mother. That was my identity. That was who I was. When Harold passed away 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer, I thought my life was over. I really did. I sat in this house, in his old lazy boy recliner, watching the walls, waiting for nothing. My kids would call once a week, maybe visit once a month if I was lucky, and I was just existing, not living, just waiting to die, honestly. But something changed in me about a year after he passed. I woke up one morning and realized I didn't want to spend whatever years I have left just waiting around. I wanted to live. So I started going to the Senior Citizen Center on Union Avenue. I joined a line dancing class. I started going to church socials again. I made friends, real friends. Women my age who understood what it's like to lose a husband, to feel invisible, to wonder if your life still has meaning. And then I met Robert Mitchell. He's 68 years old, a retired accountant from FedEx. He's a widower, too. Lost his wife Martha 3 years ago to breast cancer. We met at a senior center field trip to Shelby Farms Park. He tripped over a tree root, I helped him up, and we just started talking, and talking, and talking. For the first time in I don't know how many years, I felt butterflies. I felt excited to wake up in the morning. I felt like a woman again, not just somebody's mother or somebody's widow. We started dating. Yes, dating at 62 and 68 years old. We'd go to movies, have lunch at Cracker Barrel, take walks around Overton Park. He'd text me good morning. He'd call just to see if I'd eaten. Simple things that made me feel seen, feel valued, feel loved. After 4 months, I decided to tell my children. I called all 4 of them, invited them for Sunday dinner. I cooked all their favorite foods, set the table nice. I was nervous but excited. I thought they'd be happy for me. I thought they'd want their mama to be happy. I was wrong. I was so wrong. When I introduced Robert to them, everything exploded. My daughter Jennifer told me I was embarrassing the family. My son Michael said I was betraying their father's memory. My daughter Rebecca called me selfish and disgusting. My son Christopher just kept shaking his head like I'd committed a crime. They interrogated Robert like he was a criminal. They accused him of being after my money, of trying to steal their inheritance, of manipulating their poor old naive mother. Robert left, and then they really started. For weeks, they called, texted, showed up at my door. They told me I was being foolish, that I was too old for this, that I needed to end it. They even hired a private investigator. Yes, you heard that right. My own children hired someone to investigate the man I was dating. And what they found changed everything. 3 weeks ago, they showed up at my house with a folder full of documents, photos, certificates. They sat me down and showed me who Robert really was. And when I saw what was in that folder, my whole world turned upside down. But here's the thing. Even after seeing everything they showed me, I made a choice. And that choice shocked them more than anything else in this whole story. What did they find? Who is Robert really? And what did I decide to do about it? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you today. Let me tell you about my marriage to Harold, because you need to understand this part, to understand everything that came after. I met Harold Thompson when I was just 16 years old. It was October 1976 at a homecoming dance at Montgomery High School here in Memphis. I was a junior, wearing a yellow dress my mama made for me. Harold was 22, already working as a mechanic at the Ford factory on Riverside Boulevard. My daddy didn't like him at first because of the age difference, but Harold was persistent. He'd show up at our house with flowers, help my daddy fix things around the yard, talk about how he was going to make something of himself. We dated for a year and a half. Well, I say dated, but really it was supervised visits in my parents' living room and church socials at First Baptist. That's just how it was back then in the South. You didn't go anywhere alone with a boy, but one night in the spring of 1978, we went too far. I got pregnant. I was 17, about to turn 18. My parents were devastated, but there was only one option in their minds and in our church community. We got married 3 weeks after I graduated high school. I was 18 years old, 3 months pregnant, walking down the aisle of First Baptist Church in a white dress that my mama let out twice because I was already showing. Jennifer was born 6 months after the wedding. Nobody said anything to our faces, but I knew people were counting on their fingers. That's how it was. You made a mistake, you got married, you lived with it, and I did. For 44 years, I lived with it. Harold was a good provider, I'll give him that. He worked hard at that Ford factory, sometimes pulling double shifts. He made sure we had a roof over our heads, food on the table, clothes on the kids' backs. We bought this house on Poplar Avenue in 1982 with a VA loan. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a small backyard. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Harold paid that mortgage every single month for 30 years until it was paid off. But providing isn't the same as being present. Harold believed in traditional roles. The man works, the woman keeps the house. The man makes decisions, the woman follows. I never worked outside the home. He didn't allow it. He'd say things like, "A woman's place is taking care of her family, not out there trying to be something she's not." So that's what I did. I took care of everything. I woke up at 5 in the morning to make his breakfast before his shift. I packed his lunch in that same metal lunchbox for 35 years. I washed his work clothes that smelled like motor oil and sweat. I kept this house clean, did all the grocery shopping at the Kroger on Poplar, cooked dinner every single night. We had 4 kids in 8 years. Jennifer in 1978, Michael in 1980, Rebecca in 1982, and Christopher in 1985. My 20s were a blur of diapers, bottles, sleepless nights, and trying to make ends meet on one factory salary. I was tired all the time. Bone tired. But that was just motherhood, everyone said. That's what you signed up for. Harold wasn't affectionate. He didn't hug me just because. He didn't tell me I looked pretty. He didn't ask about my day because, well, what was there to ask? I was home with the kids. That was my day, every day. Intimacy was something that happened on his schedule, when he wanted it. It wasn't about connection or love. It was just something married people did. I learned early on not to expect romance or tenderness. That was stuff from movies and books, not real life in a working-class neighborhood in Memphis, Tennessee. My world was small. It was this house, First Baptist Church on Sundays and Wednesdays, the Kroger grocery store, and the kids' schools. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every football game when the boys played at Central High. I was room mother, PTA volunteer, the mom who made 3 dozen cupcakes for every class party. But I didn't have friends, not really. I knew other moms from school and church, but we didn't go out for coffee or have deep conversations. Harold didn't like me going out without him, and honestly, when would I have time anyway? The kids grew up. They went to college, got jobs, got married, moved away. Jennifer went to Nashville. Michael stayed in Memphis but moved to Germantown, the fancy suburb. Rebecca got divorced and moved to Cordova with her son. Christopher went all the way to Atlanta for some tech job. And suddenly, it was just me and Harold in this house. Empty nest, they call it. I thought maybe we'd reconnect, maybe travel a little, maybe finally get to know each other as just 2 people instead of parents. But we didn't. Harold would come home from work, eat dinner, sit in his recliner, and watch TV until he fell asleep. Then he'd wake up and go to bed. Every single day, the same routine. We barely talked. We'd been married over 40 years, and I realized we didn't actually know each other. We just existed in the same space, performing our roles. I remember one afternoon when I was about 60 years old. I was in the bathroom doing my hair, and I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked. And I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. My hair was gray. I had deep lines around my mouth from years of pressing my lips together, holding words in. My eyes looked tired, old. And I thought, Who is this person? Where did Patricia go? The girl who used to dream about traveling, about learning new things, about maybe going to college someday? She was gone. She disappeared somewhere between 1978 and 2018, buried under 40 years of laundry and grocery lists and being whatever everyone else needed me to be. I cried that day, stood in my bathroom and just cried. But then I wiped my face, put on my mask, and went downstairs to start dinner. Because that's what you did. You kept going. That was my life. That was my marriage. And I thought that's how it would be until one of us died. March 2020. That's when everything changed. Harold started feeling sick. At first, he thought it was just indigestion. He'd come home from the Ford factory complaining about stomach pain, saying the cafeteria food must have been bad. But it didn't go away. Weeks went by and he was losing weight, looking pale, barely eating. I begged him to see a doctor. Harold hated doctors, thought they were a waste of money, but finally he agreed to go. They did tests, lots of tests. And then we got the phone call to come back in. I'll never forget sitting in that office at Baptist Memorial Hospital, holding Harold's hand, watching the doctor's face as he told us. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. It had already spread. There wasn't much they could do except try to make him comfortable. Maybe 6 months, the doctor said. Maybe less. This was right when COVID-19 hit Tennessee. The whole world was shutting down. Stores were running out of toilet paper. Everyone was scared. The hospital visits became complicated with all the new rules, masks, temperature checks, limited visitors. Harold started chemotherapy, but it made him so sick. He'd throw up for days after each treatment, lost his hair, lost more weight. My strong husband, who'd worked in that factory for 35 years, was disappearing in front of my eyes. I took care of him. That's what I did. That's what I'd always done. I learned how to manage his medications, 7 different pills at different times of the day. I learned how to help him to the bathroom when he was too weak to walk alone. I changed sheets when he couldn't make it in time. I cooked soft foods he could keep down, scrambled eggs and mashed potatoes and broth. I slept in a chair next to our bed so I could hear if he needed me in the night. The kids called, but they didn't visit much. Jennifer was in Nashville dealing with her own family and the pandemic. She'd call every few days asking how Daddy was doing, but she was scared of COVID, scared of bringing it to her kids. Michael lived right here in Memphis, just 20 minutes away in Germantown, but he was worried about exposing his family. He'd drop off groceries on the porch and wave from the driveway. Rebecca was working at Methodist Hospital as a nurse, dealing with COVID patients, exhausted all the time. Christopher was stuck in Atlanta, couldn't travel because of lockdowns and his job going remote, so it was just me and Harold, in this house, for 6 months. I watched him fade. The cancer moved fast. By August, he couldn't get out of bed. Hospice came, set up equipment in our bedroom, taught me how to use it. They were kind, those hospice nurses, but they'd leave and it would just be me again. Me and Harold and the sound of that oxygen machine running all day and all night. He died on September 15th, 2020. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting next to the bed, holding his hand. His breathing had been bad all night, that rattling sound they told me to expect. And then it just stopped, just like that. 44 years of marriage ended with silence. I sat there for a long time, still holding his hand, not really believing it was over. Then I called hospice. Then I called the kids. The funeral was small. COVID restrictions meant only 10 people could attend. We buried him at Memorial Park Cemetery on Poplar Avenue. Jennifer drove down from Nashville. Michael and Rebecca came. Christopher couldn't get a flight in time, watched on video call. Some of Harold's co-workers from Ford came, standing 6 feet apart in masks. It was strange and sad and wrong. Harold should have had a big funeral. He worked at that factory for 35 years, knew hundreds of people. But instead it was just us few, standing around a grave in masks, not even able to hug each other. After the funeral, the kids left. They had to get back to their lives, their jobs, their families. And I was alone. Truly alone for the first time in my life. I'd gone from my parents' house to married life at 18. I'd never lived alone. Never been alone. And now, at 62 years old, the house was empty. The silence was the worst part. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. out of habit, start to make coffee for 2, then remember, just 1 cup now. I'd cook dinner, set out 2 plates, then put 1 back. I'd hear a noise and turn to tell Harold something, but he wasn't there. His recliner sat empty. His coffee mug was still in the cabinet. His work boots were still by the back door. I couldn't bring myself to move them. The kids called once a week, maybe twice. It was always the same conversation. "How are you doing, Mama?" "I'm fine. Do you need anything?" "No, I'm okay." "All right. Well, I'll call you next week." And that was it. Jennifer was busy with her teaching job and her 3 kids doing virtual school. Michael was running his car dealership, dealing with pandemic business problems. Rebecca was exhausted from working at the hospital during COVID. Christopher was stressed with his job in Atlanta. They all had their own lives, their own problems. I understood. I did. But understanding didn't make the loneliness hurt less. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I'd sit in Harold's recliner watching Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy every night, the same shows we'd watched together. I'd go to Kroger once a week, wearing my mask, not talking to anyone. Church went virtual, so I watched services on my iPad alone in my living room. I joined Zoom calls with my Sunday school class, but it wasn't the same as being there, having coffee and cookies, hugging your church family. I started to feel invisible, like I was fading away just like Harold had. I'd go days without speaking out loud to another human being. I'd look in the mirror and think, is this it? Is this how I'm going to spend whatever years I have left? Alone in this house, waiting for weekly phone calls, watching game shows, slowly disappearing? 1 year after Harold died, I was sitting in that recliner on a Tuesday night, the anniversary of his death, and I had this moment of clarity. I could keep living like this, just existing, waiting to die. Or I could choose something different. I could choose to actually live. That night, I made a decision. I didn't know what it would look like yet, but I knew I couldn't keep going like this. Something had to change. The decision to change my life didn't happen overnight. It started small, with fear and doubt and a lot of second-guessing. But I knew if I didn't do something, I was going to waste away in this house. So in October 2021, about a year after Harold passed, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I got dressed up, did my hair nice, and drove myself to the Senior Citizen Center on Union Avenue. I'd driven past that building 1,000 times, but never went in. It always seemed like a place for old people, and I didn't think of myself that way. But I was 62 years old, which made me exactly the demographic they served. I parked my car, sat there for 10 minutes working up the courage, and finally walked through those doors. The woman at the front desk, her name was Carol, she was so welcoming. She gave me a tour, showed me the different activities they offered. There was an exercise room, a computer lab, a craft room, even a small library. They had classes every day: line dancing on Mondays, quilting circle on Tuesdays, water aerobics at the YMCA on Wednesdays, bridge games on Thursdays, and bingo on Fridays. I signed up for everything. I figured if I was going to do this, I might as well jump in with both feet. That first Monday, I showed up for line dancing. I felt ridiculous, I'm not going to lie. Here I was, 62 years old, trying to learn the Cupid Shuffle with a room full of women my age. But you know what? It was fun. For the first time in, I don't know how long, I was laughing. Really laughing. My feet were getting tangled up. I was going left when everyone else went right, but nobody cared. Everyone was just having a good time. I met Dorothy that day. Dorothy Henderson, 68 years old, widow for 5 years. She took me under her wing, introduced me around, made sure I felt included. Through Dorothy, I met Linda, Barbara, and Shirley. All widows, all living alone, all trying to figure out what the rest of their lives looked like. We started having lunch together at the center, then going out to Cracker Barrel on Thursdays after bridge. These women understood me in a way my own children didn't. They knew what it was like to lose your identity when your husband dies, to to feel invisible, to wonder if anyone would ever see you as a woman again, or just as somebody's grandmother. I started taking care of myself in ways I hadn't in years. I joined the YMCA on Poplar and started going to water aerobics 3 mornings a week. I wasn't trying to look like a model or anything, but I wanted to feel healthy, feel strong. I lost about 30 pounds over 6 months, not from dieting, just from moving my body and eating better. I started going to the beauty parlor on Cooper Street every other week, getting my hair done proper instead of just cutting it myself over the bathroom sink like I'd been doing. I bought new clothes. Nothing fancy, just some nice slacks and blouses from Dillard's at the mall, colors that weren't beige or gray. I bought a coral-colored cardigan that made me feel pretty. I bought shoes that weren't just practical, but actually looked nice. Harold used to say spending money on appearance was vanity, but he was gone, and it was my social security check. I could spend it how I wanted. The kids noticed. Jennifer called me one day in December and said, "Mama, why are you spending money at the beauty parlor every week?" I told her because I wanted to look nice for myself. She got quiet, then said, "You're acting different." I said, "Good. I'm living different." She didn't like that answer. Over the next few weeks, I could tell they were talking about me. Michael called, asking if I was feeling okay mentally. Rebecca wanted to know if I was taking any new medications that might be affecting my judgment. Christopher asked if maybe I should see a doctor, get checked out, make sure everything was all right. They were worried, they said, but it wasn't worried like concern for my happiness. It was worried like I was doing something wrong by not staying in my grief forever, like I was supposed to just sit in this house wearing Harold's old sweatshirts and watching TV until I died. That wasn't worry. That was control. But I kept going. I started volunteering at Meals on Wheels, delivering food to homebound seniors twice a week. I joined a book club at the Benjamin L. Hooks Central Library downtown. I even took a computer class at the senior center and learned how to use an iPhone properly, not just for phone calls, but for texting and Facebook. I got on Facebook for the first time in my life and reconnected with people from high school I hadn't talked to in 40 years. I started driving places I'd never gone alone. Harold had always driven everywhere. He never liked me driving on the interstate, said it was too dangerous, that I'd get confused. Well, in January 2022, I drove myself to Nashville to visit Jennifer. Took I-40 all by myself. 2 hours there, 2 hours back. And you know what? I didn't get confused. I didn't crash. I felt free. Like I'd broken some invisible chain I didn't even know was holding me down. My world got bigger. For 44 years, my world had been this house, First Baptist Church, and Kroger. Now I was going to the Memphis Botanic Garden for their senior walking group. I was going to free concerts at Levitt Shell in Overton Park. I was taking day trips with Dorothy and the girls to Tunica casinos, not to gamble much, just to get out and do something different. I went to the Civil Rights Museum downtown, something I'd lived in Memphis my whole life and never done. I felt like I was discovering my own city for the first time. I was happy, genuinely happy in a way I couldn't remember being since I was a teenager, before marriage and babies and responsibility. I'd wake up in the morning excited about the day instead of dreading it. I had things to look forward to, places to go, people who actually wanted to spend time with me. Not because they had to, not because I was cooking for them or doing something for them, but just because they enjoyed my company. The church ladies at First Baptist started treating me different too. Some were supportive, telling me how good I looked, how nice it was to see me coming back to life. But others whispered. I'd see them in the church lobby after service, talking in little groups, going quiet when I walked by. I heard through the grapevine that some of them thought I was disrespecting Harold's memory by moving on so quickly. 2 years wasn't long enough, apparently. I should still be in mourning. But I wasn't mourning anymore. I'd done that for a year. I'd cried all the tears. And now I was ready to live whatever life I had left. I didn't know what that would look like exactly, but I knew it wasn't going to be sitting alone in an empty house waiting for death. That much I knew for sure. April 16th, 2022. I remember the exact date because it was the day my life changed again. The Senior Citizen Center had organized a field trip to Shelby Farms Park. It's this huge park on the east side of Memphis, over 4,000 acres. I'd lived in Memphis my entire life, and had only been there maybe twice, both times decades ago when the kids were little. Dorothy had signed us up, said it would be good to get outside, enjoy the spring weather, maybe walk some of the trails. There were about 15 of us on that trip. The center provided a van, and we all piled in like school kids going on a field trip. We got to Shelby Farms around 10 in the morning. It was a beautiful day, sunny but not too hot yet, probably mid-70s. Perfect Tennessee spring weather. We walked around the lake, fed the ducks, just enjoying being outside and being together. Around 11:30, I was tired from walking, so I found a bench near the water and sat down. I'd brought a sandwich from home, turkey and cheese on wheat bread, and I was just sitting there eating and watching people go by. Families with little kids, young couples holding hands, dogs running around. It was peaceful. I was content just sitting there by myself, which was new for me. I'd learned to be comfortable in my own company over the past few months. That's when I saw him. This man, older, maybe late 60s, walking on the path near my bench. He was looking at the lake, not paying attention to where he was walking, and his foot caught on a tree root that was sticking up through the path. He stumbled forward, arms windmilling, trying to catch his balance. I jumped up from the bench, thinking he was about to fall flat on his face, and reached out to steady him. He caught himself, straightened up, looked at me with this embarrassed smile. "I'm so sorry," he said. "That was quite an entrance." I laughed and told him I was just glad he didn't fall. We stood there for a second, and then he gestured to the bench and asked if he could sit down, catch his breath. I said of course. His name was Robert Mitchell. He told me right away, held out his hand for a proper handshake. Very polite, very Southern gentleman. He was 68 years old, retired, living here in Memphis. He'd come to Shelby Farms to walk, something his doctor told him he needed to do more of. We started talking, just casual conversation at first. The weather, the park, how nice it was to be outside. Then the conversation went deeper. He asked if I lived in Memphis, and I told him yes, my whole life, raised 4 kids here. He said he'd lived here most of his life too, moved here in his 20s for work. He'd been an accountant at FedEx for 32 years before retiring in 2019. FedEx is a big deal in Memphis. It's headquartered here. So many people work there. He talked about his career, the changes he'd seen in the company over 3 decades. I asked if he was married, which felt bold for me to ask, but it seemed like a natural question. His face got sad. He said he was a widower. His wife Martha had passed away 3 years ago from breast cancer. They'd been married 42 years. He still wore his wedding ring. I could see the sadness in his eyes when he talked about her. I told him I was a widow too. Harold had died a year and a half ago from pancreatic cancer. I was surprised at how easy it was to talk to Robert about it. With my kids, they didn't want to hear about their daddy dying. It made them uncomfortable. With church people, they'd give me these pitying looks and change the subject. But Robert understood. He'd been through it. He knew what it was like to watch someone you love waste away from cancer, to feel helpless, to be left alone afterward. We talked for 2 hours straight. I forgot about my senior center group. I forgot about everything except this conversation. We discovered we had so much in common. We both loved old movies, especially anything with John Wayne. We both watched Jeopardy every night at 7:30. We both liked our coffee black with no sugar. We both had kids who were too busy to visit much. We both knew what it felt like to be invisible in your own life. Robert was easy to talk to. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He didn't interrupt or change the subject. When I talked, he looked at me, really looked at me, like what I was saying mattered. I couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at me like that. Harold had stopped seeing me years before he died, if he ever really saw me at all. Around 1:30, Dorothy came looking for me. The group was heading back to the van. I introduced her to Robert, and she gave me this knowing look, this little smile. Robert stood up, shook her hand, very polite. Then he turned to me and asked if I came to Shelby Farms often. I said no, This was my first time in years. He said he came every Saturday morning to walk. Then he asked, and I remember this so clearly, he asked if maybe I'd like to meet him there next Saturday. We could walk together. I should have felt nervous or uncertain, but I didn't. I just felt happy. I said yes. He smiled, this genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. We exchanged phone numbers. He put my number in his phone right there, called my phone so I'd have his number too. Then he said he looked forward to Saturday, and he walked away toward the parking lot. I got back in the van with the senior center group, and Dorothy immediately grabbed my arm. "Girl," she said, "who was that?" I told her just someone I met. We talked for a while. She laughed and said, "Honey, y'all talked for 2 hours. I watched you. That wasn't just talking. That was something else." I felt my face get hot. Was it that obvious? The whole ride back to the center, I couldn't stop thinking about Robert, about his kind eyes, his gentle voice, the way he listened, the way he asked if he could see me again. I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Excitement, anticipation, hope. That night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about Saturday. 5 days away. I couldn't wait. That week between meeting Robert and Saturday felt like the longest week of my life. I caught myself thinking about him constantly, wondering what he was doing, wondering if he was thinking about me too. I felt like a teenager again, and that scared me. I was 62 years old, way too old to be feeling butterflies over a man, way too old to be checking my phone every 10 minutes to see if he'd texted. But that's exactly what I was doing. He did text. Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed. It was Robert. Just a simple message saying it was nice meeting me on Saturday and he was looking forward to our walk. I must have read that text 20 times. Then I spent 15 minutes trying to figure out how to respond. I didn't want to sound too eager, but I didn't want to sound uninterested either. Finally, I just wrote back that I was looking forward to it too. He responded with a smiley face emoji, a smiley face, and I sat there grinning at my phone like a fool. But alongside that excitement was guilt, deep, heavy guilt. I felt like I was betraying Harold. He'd only been gone a year and a half, and here I was getting excited about another man. I kept thinking about our wedding vows. Till death do us part. Death had parted us, but was a year and a half long enough? How long was I supposed to wait? Was there a rule for this? I didn't know. I talked to Dorothy about it. We met for coffee at Starbucks on Thursday, and I told her everything. How I felt excited, but also guilty. How I kept thinking about Robert but felt like I was doing something wrong. Dorothy listened. Then she put her hand on mine and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Honey, Harold is gone. He's with the Lord now. But you're still here. You're still alive. And you have every right to be happy. God doesn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone and miserable. That's not honoring Harold's memory. That's just punishing yourself." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did believe her. But another part of me, the part that had been raised in a conservative Southern Baptist church, that had been taught that wives were supposed to be devoted to their husbands forever, that part couldn't shake the feeling that this was wrong somehow. I even called Pastor Williams at First Baptist on Friday. I asked if I could come talk to him about something personal. He said, of course, come by the church. So I went that afternoon, sat in his office, and told him everything. About meeting Robert, about feeling guilty, about not knowing if it was okay to have feelings for another man. Pastor Williams was in his 60s, had been our pastor for about 15 years. He'd officiated Harold's funeral. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Sister Patricia, let me ask you something. Do you remember what the Bible says about marriage?" I nodded. He said, "It says till death do us part. Death has already parted you from Harold. You fulfilled your vows. You were faithful to him for 44 years. You took care of him when he was sick. You were there when he died. You've mourned him, and now you're still alive. And you have the right to live." His words helped. They really did. But I still felt conflicted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Harold, wondering what he would think. Would he want me to be alone forever? Would he be angry? Hurt? Part of me thought he would be. Harold was possessive in life. He didn't like me going anywhere without him, didn't like other men even talking to me. Would death change that? But then I thought about something else. Harold and I hadn't had a real marriage in years. We'd been roommates more than husband and wife. We barely talked. We had no physical intimacy. We just existed in the same house. If I was being honest with myself, I'd been lonely for years before he died. The loneliness didn't start when he passed. It had been there all along. Saturday morning came. I changed my outfit 3 times before leaving the house. Finally settled on a nice pair of khaki pants and that coral cardigan I'd bought at Dillard's. Did my hair, put on a little makeup, even dabbed on some perfume I'd gotten for Christmas years ago and never opened. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked hopeful. She looked alive. I got to Shelby Farms at 9:30. Robert was already there, waiting at the same bench where we'd first talked. He stood up when he saw me walking over. He was wearing jeans and a light blue button-down shirt. He smiled that warm smile, and my nervousness melted away a little. We walked for over an hour, talking the whole time. The conversation flowed so easily. He told me about his life. He'd grown up in Arkansas, moved to Memphis in 1978 when FedEx was still young and growing. He'd worked his way up in the accounting department, spent his whole career there. He talked about Martha, his late wife, with such tenderness. They'd met at a church picnic in 1977, married a year later. She'd been a school teacher. They'd had 2 kids, David and Sarah, both grown now with families of their own. David lived in Houston, Sarah in Tampa. Neither visited much. I told him about my life too, about marrying young, about raising 4 kids mostly on my own because Harold was always working, about feeling invisible for so many years, about the last year and a half of learning to live alone and discovering I actually liked my own company. He listened to all of it without judgment, without trying to fix anything, just listening. We got coffee at the Starbucks near the park entrance and sat outside talking for another hour. Around noon, he asked if I'd like to do this again, maybe next Wednesday? I said yes before I even thought about it. He asked for my email address, said he'd send me some photos of Memphis from the 70s that he'd found in old boxes. I gave it to him. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, there was this moment. We were standing by my car and he reached out and touched my hand. Just briefly. Just his fingers on mine. And I felt electricity. Actual electricity running up my arm. I looked up at him, and he was looking at me with these soft eyes. He said, "I really enjoyed this morning, Patricia." I said I did too. And I meant it. I drove home feeling like I was floating. But as soon as I walked into my empty house, the guilt came rushing back. I looked at Harold's photo on the mantel, his face staring at me. And I wondered what I was doing. Was this betrayal? Was this moving on? Was there even a difference? I didn't know. All I knew was that for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt something other than duty and obligation. I felt desire. I felt hope. I felt alive, and I didn't know if I should feel ashamed of that or grateful for it. Robert and I kept seeing each other. Wednesday walks turned into Saturday lunches. Saturday lunches turned into Tuesday afternoon coffee. By June, we were seeing each other 3 or 4 times a week. We'd go to Cracker Barrel for dinner. We'd drive out to the agri-center and walk around the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. We'd sit in his living room in Germantown and watch Jeopardy together, yelling out answers at the TV. Simple things, easy things, things that made me happy. By the end of June, we were holding hands when we walked. By mid-July, he kissed me. It was at Overton Park, sitting on a bench watching the sunset. He turned to me and said, "Patricia, I really care about you." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I looked at him and said, "I care about you too, Robert." And he leaned in and kissed me, soft and gentle and sweet. I cried. I actually cried because I couldn't remember the last time someone had kissed me with tenderness instead of obligation. We were dating. That's what it was. At 62 and 68 years old, we were dating like teenagers. He'd text me good morning every day. He'd call me at night just to hear my voice before bed. He'd send me photos of things that made him think of me, a cardinal at his bird feeder, a sunset, a funny sign he saw. I'd never experienced anything like this. Harold had never courted me. We'd gotten pregnant and gotten married, and that was it. This felt like something from a romance novel, not real life. 4 months went by. It was now August 2022. And I knew I needed to tell my kids. I couldn't keep this secret forever. They called me every week, and I'd been vague about what I was doing, where I'd been. I told them I was busy with the senior center, with church activities, with friends. All true, but not the whole truth. I was spending most of my free time with Robert, and they didn't know he existed. I decided to do it right. Have them all over for Sunday dinner, introduce them properly, let them see how happy I was. I called each of them. Jennifer in Nashville, Michael here in Memphis, Rebecca in Cordova, Christopher in Atlanta. Told them I needed them all to come over on Sunday, August 21st at 2 o'clock. I had something important to tell them. They all asked what it was. I said they'd have to wait and see. That week I was a nervous wreck. I cleaned this house top to bottom. I cooked for 2 days straight, made fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, coleslaw, cornbread, and pecan pie, all their favorites. Set the dining room table with the good china I only used at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I wanted everything perfect. I told Robert to come at 2:15, give me time to prepare the kids first. He was nervous too. He kept asking, what if they don't like me? What if they're angry? What if this ruins your relationship with them? I told him it would be fine. They were my children. They loved me. They'd want me to be happy. I believed that. I really did. Sunday came. Jennifer arrived first with her husband Tom and their 3 kids, then Michael with his wife Stephanie. Rebecca came alone. Her teenage son stayed with his dad. Christopher flew in Saturday night, stayed at a hotel. By 1:45, they were all here, standing around my living room, curious and confused about why I'd called this family meeting. At 2 o'clock, I asked them all to sit down at the dining table. They kept asking what this was about. I told them to be patient. My hands were shaking. At 2:15, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it. Robert was standing there in dress slacks and a nice button-down shirt, holding a bouquet of yellow roses. He looked terrified. I took his hand, and we walked into the dining room together. The silence that fell over that room was deafening. 8 adults and 3 kids all staring at us, at our joined hands, at the flowers, at this man they'd never seen before standing in their dead father's house. I cleared my throat and said, "Kids, this is Robert Mitchell. He's someone very special to me. He's my boyfriend." The word boyfriend hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Jennifer stood up slowly from her chair. "Mama," she said, her voice shaking. "What did you just say?" I repeated it. "This is Robert. We've been seeing each other for 4 months. I wanted you all to meet him." Michael's face turned red. Rebecca's mouth was hanging open. Christopher just stared. Jennifer looked at Robert, then at me, then back at Robert. "You've got to be kidding me," she finally said. "A boyfriend? You?" I felt my face flush. "Why not me?" I asked. "Because you're a widow," Jennifer said, her voice getting louder. "Because you're 62 years old. Because you have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Because you're a grandmother, Mama. Grandmothers don't have boyfriends." Michael stood up then. "And what about Daddy?" he said. "Daddy's been dead for what? Not even 2 years? And you're already replaced him?" I tried to explain that I hadn't replaced anyone, that Harold was gone, that I was allowed to move forward with my life. But Michael wasn't listening. None of them were listening. Rebecca started crying. "How could you do this?" she said. "How could you betray Daddy like this? Spit on his memory? On everything he built for this family?" Her words stung. I looked at Robert. His face had gone pale. He tried to speak. "Folks," he said, "I understand this is a shock, but I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I care very deeply about your mother." Michael cut him off. Sir, with all due respect, you need to be quiet. You're not family, you're just some man trying to take advantage of our mother. Robert's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. Christopher finally spoke up. How long has this been going on, Mama? Have you been lying to us this whole time? The questions came rapid fire then. Where did you meet him? How much does he know about your finances? Has he been in this house before? Are you sleeping with him? That last question came from Rebecca, and it made my face burn with embarrassment and anger. That's none of your business, I said. Everything about you is our business, Michael shot back. You're our mother. We have a right to know who's coming around you, especially some stranger trying to get his hands on what Daddy left you. Robert squeezed my hand and said quietly, Patricia, maybe I should go. I looked at him, saw the hurt in his eyes, and wanted to tell him no, stay, we'd work through this. But the room was chaos now. All 4 kids talking at once, over each other, their voices getting louder and angrier. The grandkids looked scared. Jennifer's youngest started crying. After 45 minutes of this, Robert said again, I think it's best if I leave. And this time I didn't stop him. He walked out my front door, leaving those yellow roses on the entry table. And I stood there facing my 4 children, all of them looking at me like I'd committed murder. After Robert left, my children made me sit down in the living room, not at the dining table where all that food I'd spent 2 days cooking sat untouched and getting cold. In the living room, like I was about to be interrogated. And that's exactly what it was. An interrogation. Michael sat in Harold's old recliner, which felt wrong. Jennifer and Rebecca sat on the couch. Christopher stood by the fireplace with his arms crossed, and I sat in the chair across from them, feeling like a child about to be scolded. Jennifer started. Mama, we need to have a serious conversation about what just happened, about what you're doing. I tried to speak, but she held up her hand. No, Mama, you need to listen. We're worried about you. This isn't normal behavior. You're not thinking clearly. I felt anger rising in my chest. I asked what wasn't normal about wanting companionship, about not wanting to spend the rest of my life alone. Michael leaned forward. Mama, this man is taking advantage of you. Can't you see that? You've got this house that Daddy worked 30 years to pay off. You've got his life insurance money, $75,000. You've got Social Security coming in every month. You've got his pension from Ford. This Robert guy knows all that. He's a predator, targeting vulnerable widows. I told him Robert had his own house, his own pension from FedEx, his own money. Michael shook his head like I was a naive child. That's what he told you, Mama. That's what they all say. Rebecca chimed in then. And what about us, Mama? What about our inheritance? Everything Daddy worked for, this house, the savings, it's supposed to be for us and the grandkids. You gonna let some stranger swoop in and take half of it? I stared at her. So that's what this was really about. Money, not my happiness, not my well-being. Money. I said the house was mine, the money was mine, and I'd do with it what I wanted. Rebecca's face went red. So you're choosing him over your own children? Over your own grandchildren? Christopher, who'd been quiet until then, spoke up. Mama, think about the kids. Jennifer's 3, Michael's 2, Rebecca's son, they all look up to you. You're their grandmother. What message does this send them? That grandma forgot about grandpa? That marriage doesn't mean anything? That you can just replace people when they die? I felt tears starting, but I blinked them back. I told him I wasn't replacing anyone. Harold was their grandfather, and always would be. But Harold was gone, and I was still here, and I deserved to have a life. They wouldn't hear it. For the next hour, they tag-teamed me. Jennifer said I was embarrassing the family. Michael said I was being selfish and foolish. Rebecca said I was dishonoring Harold's memory. Christopher said I needed to think about someone other than myself for once. That last one hurt the most. I'd spent 44 years thinking about everyone but myself. And now that I was finally putting my own happiness first, I was selfish. Finally, they left. Jennifer hugged me stiff and cold before walking out. Michael didn't hug me at all. Rebecca was still crying. Christopher said he'd call me later, but his voice was disappointed. After they left, I sat in that living room, surrounded by all that uneaten food, and I cried. I cried harder than I'd cried since Harold died, because my own children had just told me I didn't deserve to be happy. The next day, the text messages started. I woke up Monday morning to 17 texts in our family group chat. Jennifer had started it. "Mama, have you thought about what we discussed? Please consider breaking things off with that man before this goes any further." Michael added, "I talked to a lawyer friend, Mama. If you marry him in Tennessee, he gets automatic rights to marital property. Half of everything you own. Do you want that?" Rebecca wrote, "Mama, I'm not sleeping. I had to call my therapist for an emergency session. This is affecting my mental health. My son is asking questions about why Grandma has a new grandpa, and I don't know what to tell him." Christopher sent, "Mama, I love you, but you're making a huge mistake. Please reconsider. Every day, more messages. Some days it was just one or two. Other days it was dozens. They created a separate text chain without me, and I only knew because Michael accidentally sent a message meant for that chain to me instead. It said, "We need to figure out how to stop this before she does something stupid like marry him." I stared at that text for a long time. They were actively plotting against me. Their own mother. The phone calls were worse. Jennifer called me crying, saying she was having panic attacks, that she couldn't focus at work, that her kids were asking why Mama was acting so weird. She begged me to end it, said if I loved her, if I loved my grandchildren, I'd break up with Robert. I told her I did love them, but I loved myself too, and I was allowed to be happy. She hung up on me. Michael showed up at my house unannounced on Wednesday. Let himself in with the key I'd given him years ago for emergencies. He said we needed to talk about my finances. Said he wanted me to move my money into a trust so that Robert couldn't get access to it. I told him no. He got angry. "Mama, you're not thinking straight. You're acting crazy. Do we need to get you evaluated? Have you tested for dementia?" I told him to get out of my house. He left, but not before saying, "Don't say I didn't warn you when this all falls apart." Rebecca sent me articles about romance scams targeting seniors, about men who prey on lonely widows, about financial elder abuse. Every article had a note. "This is what's happening to you, Mama. Open your eyes." I deleted them without reading after the first 3. The worst was when Jennifer brought my granddaughter Lily over on Thursday. Lily was 7 years old, sweet as could be. Jennifer sent her into the living room where I was sitting, while Jennifer stayed in the kitchen. Lily climbed up on the couch next to me and said, "Grandma, Mommy says you don't love Grandpa anymore. Is that true?" My heart stopped. I asked her why she would think that. She said Mommy told her that Grandma has a new friend, and that means Grandma forgot about Grandpa. I pulled that baby close and told her I would always love Grandpa. He was her grandfather, and nothing would change that. But Grandpa was in heaven now, and Grandma was still here, and Grandma had a friend who made her happy. Lily looked confused. She was 7. This was too much for her to understand. And Jennifer knew that. She'd used her own daughter as a weapon against me. I stopped answering their calls as much, stopped responding to every text. They noticed. Michael sent a message saying, "Mama, you're pulling away from your family. This is what he wants. He wants to isolate you from us so he can control you. That's how these predators work." I wanted to scream. They were the ones pushing me away. They were the ones making me choose. But in their minds, I was the problem. I was the one destroying this family, not them. Me. 3 weeks went by. 3 weeks of daily text messages, phone calls I didn't answer, voicemails I deleted without listening. I blocked the family group chat because I couldn't take it anymore. I was seeing Robert regularly, trying to enjoy our time together, but this cloud was hanging over everything. He could tell I was stressed. He kept asking if we should take a break, give my kids time to adjust. I told him no. I'd made my choice, and I was sticking with it. Then on a Tuesday morning in mid-September, my phone rang. It was Michael. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. His voice was different when I picked up. Calm. Too calm. "Mama," he said, "we need to talk. All of us. In person. Can you come to my house tomorrow at 3 o'clock? All 4 of us will be there." My stomach dropped. I asked what this was about. He said we'd discuss it tomorrow. "I need you to come, Mama. It's important." Then he hung up. I couldn't sleep that night. I called Robert at 11 p.m., which I never did. Told him about the call. He said maybe they'd come around. Maybe they wanted to apologize. I said I hope so, but I didn't believe it. Something in Michael's voice scared me. Robert offered to come with me. I said no. This was something I needed to face alone. Wednesday afternoon. I drove to Michael's house in Germantown. He lived in one of those big subdivisions with houses that all looked the same, manicured lawns, 2-car garages. His house was the biggest one he could afford, trying to show everyone he'd made it. I parked in the driveway next to Jennifer's car from Nashville and Rebecca's SUV. Christopher had flown back in. Whatever this was, it was serious enough for him to take time off work and buy another plane ticket. I rang the doorbell even though Michael had told me to just come in. Stephanie, Michael's wife, answered. She looked uncomfortable, gave me a weak smile and said they were all in the dining room. I walked through the house I'd been to dozens of times, but it felt different now, felt hostile. I walked into the dining room, and all 4 of my kids were sitting there. The table was covered with papers, folders, a laptop computer open. My heart started racing. Michael stood up. "Mama, thanks for coming. Please sit down." I sat, looked around at their faces. They all looked serious, determined. Jennifer looked like she'd been crying. Rebecca wouldn't make eye contact. Christopher's jaw was clenched. Michael stayed standing at the head of the table like he was running a business meeting. He started talking. "Mama, over the past 3 weeks we've been doing some research. We hired a private investigator, a good one, out of Nashville. We had Robert James Mitchell investigated thoroughly. Everything about him, his past, his finances, his background, everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You did what?" My voice came out as a whisper. Jennifer jumped in. "We had to, Mama. We had to protect you since you won't protect yourself." Michael opened one of the folders, started reading from it like he was presenting evidence in court. Robert James Mitchell, born March 15, 1954, in Little Rock, Arkansas. Moved to Memphis in 1978. Married to Martha Louise Mitchell on June 10, 1978, at Grace Community Church. 2 children, David born 1980, Sarah born 1983. Wife Martha died August 3, 2019 from breast cancer. He looked up at me. "All of that checks out, Mama. That's all true. So far, so good." He kept going. Owned a home at 2847 Walnut Grove Road in Germantown since 1985. Mortgage paid off in 2015. Property value approximately $450,000. Retired from FedEx in December 2019 after 32 years. Pension of approximately $4,000 per month. Social Security another $2,000 per month. Savings of approximately $230,000 split between checking and investment accounts. Credit score 780. No debt, no criminal record, no bankruptcies, no liens, nothing. Michael threw the folder on the table. "Nothing, Mama. We found absolutely nothing wrong with this man." Rebecca picked it up. "His neighbors say he's quiet, keeps to himself, takes care of his property. His former co-workers at FedEx say he was reliable, honest, good at his job. People at his church say he's a good man, faithful, shows up every Sunday. His kids, we tried to contact them, but they didn't return our calls. But from what we can find, normal relationship. He sends them money at Christmas. They came for their mother's funeral." I stared at them. "So you investigated him and found out he's exactly who he said he is. A good man. An honest man. And you're upset about that?" Jennifer shook her head hard. "No, Mama. We're not upset. We're suspicious. Because people who are this clean, this perfect, they're hiding something. Nobody is this squeaky clean. He's got to be hiding something big. Christopher spoke up then. So we kept digging. We went back further. We looked into his life before Memphis, before FedEx, before Martha. We found some things that don't add up. I felt my chest tighten. What things? Michael pulled out another folder. This one was thicker. Opened it and spread papers across the table. Old papers. Photocopies of documents from the 70s. Newspaper clippings, birth certificates, marriage licenses. Rebecca leaned forward. Mama, did Robert ever tell you about his life before he moved to Memphis? About what he did before FedEx? I thought about it. He'd said he moved here in 1978 for work, that he'd met Martha that same year, that he'd grown up in Arkansas. But now that I thought about it, he'd been vague about those years before Memphis. I'd never pushed because everyone has parts of their past they don't talk about much. Michael put a photograph in front of me. It was old, faded, from the 70s based on the clothes and the cars in the background. A young man who looked like Robert, maybe mid-20s, standing with a woman, not Martha, someone else. 2 young men standing next to them, teenagers maybe. Children playing in the background, everyone smiling. I looked closer at the young man's face. It was Robert, I was sure of it. I looked up at Michael. Who are these people? He put another document down. A marriage license from 1972. Little Rock, Arkansas. Robert James Mitchell to Linda Mae Patterson. I stopped breathing. This had to be a mistake. Robert was married in 1978. To Martha. Not in 1972 to someone named Linda. Michael must have seen my confusion. He put down another document. A birth certificate. Baby boy born 1973. Mother Linda Mae Mitchell. Father Robert James Mitchell. Jennifer put her hand on mine. Mama, there's more. A lot more. Michael kept laying out documents like he was dealing cards. Another birth certificate, 1975, same parents. Newspaper clipping from 1976, Little Rock Gazette, about a car accident. 3 people killed. I couldn't process what I was seeing. Rebecca pulled out a death certificate. Linda Mae Mitchell died October 1976, age 26, car accident. The room was spinning. I looked at Christopher. He nodded slowly. It's all verified, Mama. We checked everything twice. Court records, hospital records, cemetery records. It's all real. Robert was married before Martha. He had 2 sons with his first wife. She died in a car accident in 1976. He was 22 years old, a widower with 2 little boys, ages 3 and 1. I tried to make sense of it. So he was married before. His wife died. That's not a crime. That's not a secret worth hiding. People get remarried after their spouse dies. I did that. I'm doing that. Jennifer shook her head. Mama, you're not understanding. Where are those boys now? Robert has 2 children, right? David and Sarah, born in the 80s to Martha. But what happened to the boys from his first marriage? Where did they go? Michael pulled out more papers, adoption records, sealed, but they'd gotten them somehow. Both boys adopted in 1977 by Linda's parents. Robert had given up his sons, signed away his parental rights, moved from Arkansas to Tennessee, started over completely, new job, new life, met Martha, married her, had 2 more children, never told anyone about the first family. I felt sick. I looked at all those documents spread across the table, birth certificates, marriage license, death certificate, adoption papers, newspaper clippings. It was all there, all real. Robert had been married before, had 2 sons he gave away, started a whole new life and never mentioned any of it. Not to Martha based on what they'd found, not to his children David and Sarah, not to anyone, and not to me. I sat there staring at those documents for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My hands were shaking. My children were all watching me, waiting for my reaction. Waiting for me to say they were right, that Robert was a liar, that I needed to end this immediately. But I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Finally, I looked up at Michael. How did you get all this? He glanced at Jennifer. We hired a good investigator, Mama. Really good. Expensive, but worth it. We needed to know who this man really was. And now we know. He's a man who abandoned his children, who erased his entire past, who's been lying to everyone, including you, for over 40 years. Rebecca reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. Mama, please. You have to see this for what it is. He's not who he says he is. He's a liar. Christopher added, We're not trying to hurt you, Mama. We're trying to protect you. This man has been deceiving you from the start. I gathered up the papers, all of them, put them back in the folder. My children watched me, uncertain. I stood up, still holding the folder. They waited for me to speak, to thank them, to tell them they were right. Instead, I said, I need to go. Jennifer stood up quickly. Mama, wait. We need to talk about what you're going to do, about how you're going to handle this. I looked at her. What I'm going to do is leave, and then I'm going to talk to Robert. Hear his side of this. Michael's face turned red. His side? Mama, it's all right there in black and white. Birth certificates don't lie. Death certificates don't lie. Court documents don't lie. What more do you need? I told him I needed to hear it from Robert. He deserved a chance to explain. Rebecca stood up too, her voice rising. Explain what? That he abandoned his kids? That he's been lying for 40 years? That he's probably been lying to you about everything? I walked toward the door. All 4 of them followed me. Jennifer grabbed my arm. Mama, if you go to him, if you give him a chance to talk his way out of this, he will. That's what liars do. They manipulate. They make excuses. Please don't go there. Stay here. Let us help you through this. I pulled my arm away gently. I appreciate what you think you're doing, but this is my life, my decision, my relationship. I need to handle this myself. I walked out of Michael's house and got in my car. Sat there for a minute trying to calm my breathing, trying to think. My phone buzzed. Text from the family group chat I'd blocked. I unblocked it long enough to see. Michael had written, She's going to him. We failed. Then I blocked it again. I drove home to Poplar Avenue. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes. Then I called Robert. He answered on the second ring, voice cheerful. Patricia, hello. I wasn't expecting to hear from you this early. How did it go with your kids? My voice shook when I spoke. Can you come over? Now? His tone changed immediately. What happened? Are you okay? Just come over, I said. We need to talk. 20 minutes later, his car pulled into my driveway. I watched him get out, watched him walk up to my front door. He looked worried. I let him in. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back. His face fell. Patricia, what's wrong? What did they say to you? I held up the folder. They hired an investigator. They dug into your past, and they found some things you never told me about. He went pale, completely pale. What things? I opened the folder and spread the documents on my coffee table. The marriage license from 1972, the birth certificates, the death certificate, the adoption papers, the newspaper clipping, all of it. I watched his face as he looked at each one, watched the color drain even more, watched his hands start to shake. He sat down heavily on my couch, put his face in his hands. I stood there waiting. Finally, he looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with tears. I was going to tell you, he whispered. I swear I was. I just didn't know how. I didn't know when. I was afraid you'd look at me differently, afraid you'd hate me. I sat down across from him, not next to him, across from him. Tell me now. Tell me everything. He took a shaky breath, started talking. Patricia, when I was 21 years old, I got married to Linda. We were kids, both of us. She got pregnant, so we got married. That's what you did back then. We had Bobby in 1973, then Danny in 1975. I was working construction, barely making enough to feed us. We were struggling, but we were making it work. He stopped, wiped his eyes. Then, in October 1976, Linda went to the grocery store with both boys in the car. A drunk driver ran a red light, hit them on the passenger side, where the boys were sitting. All three of them died: Linda, Bobby, and Danny. I was at work. Police came to tell me. I was 22 years old and my entire family was gone. I felt my chest tighten. Robert, I'm so sorry, but the documents say Linda died. The boys didn't. They were adopted. He shook his head. That's what the papers say, because that's what I told everyone. But the truth is they died that day. All three of them. I saw their bodies at the morgue. I buried them together. Linda's parents, they couldn't accept it. They were so destroyed they couldn't function. A few months later, Linda's father killed himself. Her mother went into a psychiatric facility. He was crying now, really crying. The adoption papers are fake. I created them years later when I needed to explain to myself why I left Arkansas, why I never talked about them. It was easier to pretend I'd given them up than to admit they were dead and I'd failed to protect them. I changed my whole life because I couldn't live in Little Rock anymore. Everything there reminded me of them. So I moved to Memphis, started over, tried to forget. I stared at him. But you had 2 more children. With Martha. He nodded. When I met Martha, I didn't tell her about Linda and the boys because I couldn't talk about it without falling apart. And then time passed, and it became this secret I'd kept too long. How do you tell someone you've been married for 10 years that you had another family that died? Another 20 years? 30? You don't. You just keep the secret and hope it never comes out. My head was spinning. So my children's documents, they're wrong? He shook his head. The marriage license is real. The birth certificates are real. The death certificate for Linda is real. But there should be death certificates for Bobby and Danny too. Those exist. Your kids must not have found them. Or maybe they did, and they're not showing you because it's better for their narrative if the boys just disappeared. I looked at him sitting on my couch, this man I'd been falling in love with, and I didn't know what to believe. Was he telling me the truth now? Or was this another lie? I heard a sound, the front door opening. I turned. All 4 of my kids were standing in my doorway. Michael was holding his key. We're not leaving you alone with him, Mama. Not until this is settled. Robert stood up. I should go. Michael stepped forward. No, sir. You should stay, because we have questions, and you're going to answer them. Right now, all of them. Robert looked at me, his eyes asking what I wanted him to do. I looked at my 4 children, their faces hard and determined. Then I looked at Robert, tears on his face, shoulders slumped. I stood up, made my decision. Get out, I said. Michael smiled, thought I meant Robert. But I turned to face my children. All 4 of you, get out of my house. Right now. Jennifer's mouth fell open. Mama, you can't be serious. You heard what he just said. Another family? Dead or alive, he lied to you. I held up my hand. I don't care. I choose him. Not you, him. They stood frozen in shock. I walked to the door, held it open. Out. Now. Or I'm calling the police. Rebecca started crying. Mama, please. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Maybe I am, I said, but it's my mistake to make, not yours. They left, one by one, Michael last, saying, Don't say we didn't warn you. I closed the door, locked it, turned back to Robert. He was still standing by the couch, looking at me with disbelief and something else. Hope, maybe. I walked over to him, sat down, said, Now you're going to tell me everything. From the very beginning. Every detail. No more lies, no more secrets, everything. He nodded, sat down, took a breath. And then he said, Patricia, I need to start by telling you something. Something nobody knows. Not even Martha knew. My real name isn't Robert Mitchell. The room went silent. I stared at him. What? He looked at me with eyes full of pain and fear and shame. My real name is Bobby Patterson. Robert Mitchell was my father's name. I took it when I moved to Memphis, when I started over. I buried Bobby Patterson with Linda and the boys. Everything I thought I knew shattered in that moment. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. He reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, and he said, "Let me tell you who I really am.